Good people, today I am going to interview Gerald Brennan with two N's. He is the founder, director, and editor of Tortoise Books, an independent press in Chicago. He has been going at it now, slow and steady, with his ups and downs for over a dozen years, publishing mainly literary fiction. I think talking to him could be illuminating, especially to aspiring authors. And in this changing world of literary publishing, legacy publishing no longer seems to be supporting attempts at literature. There is a huge surge in self-publishing. Substack is emerging as an alternate way to publish long-form fiction. And then there's this middle way, which is independent presses. I'm going to try to talk as little as possible. I've got a whole bunch of questions prepared. I hope he has time to answer them all. My book, My Half Orange, was published through Tortoise Books, so I can say that he is an honest man. He works hard, he does his best, and he's articulate. He's a writer himself. So let's get into it. John Julius Reel interviewing Gerald Brennan from Tortoise Books. A quick reminder, to support the cause, you can always like, comment, or follow, or if my passion and insights about literature make you curious about my own attempts at it, there is always My Half Orange, a story of love and language in Seville, published by Tortoise Books in 2023, about the 10 most transformative years of my life when I moved from New York City to Seville, Spain in 2005, met a local woman, and started a family with her without hardly speaking Spanish. I plan to soon upload an audio version to Substack, Rants from a Foreign Land, John Julius Reel. Follow me there to receive all my updates by email. Thanks, good people.
Jerry, it's good to finally have you, man. It's good to finally be able to talk to you. How are you?
I'm good, John. Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah. When you told me you were up for this, I sat down and I wrote out a bunch of questions. So I'm just going to ask them and you're going to, shine as you respond. Okay? Does that sound good, Jerry?
Yeah, I'll do my best.
Okay. Well, the first question then. Tortoise Books was founded, I think, in 2012, right? It's in Chicago.
Yep.
How many books and how many authors have you published at this point?
We're coming up on 70 books. It really depends on whether you count the stuff that's in the pipeline or not. But yeah, it's around 70 any way you cut it. And authors is a little fewer just because there's a few people that I've done multiple books for. So maybe 50. Yeah, I'd have to count it up.
And how many books do you publish in a year?
This year's high. It's going to be 9 this year, but I realized that was too much, and I think the ideal is going to be 7 going forward. So,
Yeah. And the project began, from what I've heard, right, owing to your frustration about trying to get a novel of your own published, right? Resistance, okay?
Yeah.
Which I think is like a 700-page literary historical fiction about some the assassination of some SS guy who was supposedly going to be the successor to Hitler. All right, could you talk a little bit about that? About how your frustration about publishing that book was sort of the germ or the thing that started the whole idea for Tortoise Books?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I was obsessed about this story since I was a teenager, basically. So it's kind of the opposite of a feel-good story. It's definitely a feel-bad story. But, be that as it may, it's an interesting enough story that one would think, more people would be interested in it. And so I spent, in 2006, I lost my job and I decided to write screenplays about this thing. And I wrote screenplays and I went to Hollywood for this pitch fest thing, which basically is like speed dating, except you do all the talking and they do all the rejecting. And the big thing I realized there is that movies are the most collaborative art form out there. And you have to have so much time and money and people, and everything has to come together for a movie to get made. There's so many gears that have to mesh. And it's hardest to happen for historical stuff because it costs a lot. There's just a lot of demands, like it's easy for like rom-coms, for instance, like contemporary rom-coms, you
Sure.
don't need to do any elaborate sets or anything like that. You can just kind of, you pay for the actors, but other than that, it's relatively inexpensive. And, so I realized like this project that I had envisioned, the big Hollywood movie, I wasn't likely to, and I thought about moving out to Hollywood with my ego in a U-Haul. And I was like, you know what, like I can write this as a book, and I at least have some control over it and some more ability to get it out there. And so from 2006 to 2009, I basically wrote the book. And for the next 3 years, I shopped it around. And I had no luck whatsoever when it was just blind queries. And then I had a friend of a friend had, just left an agency, and it was like, well, hey, maybe submit there, tell them I sent you, all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, this manuscript that like nobody had been responding to the query letters about, this woman at this agency read the manuscript, and she was like, wow, like I never get manuscripts that are in this good a shape. Like this is really fantastic. It kept sending me to Wikipedia to read more about the events. Like I just wanted to know more. This was great. So I'm like, oh, great. I got an agent, We talked on the phone. I did a round of revisions for her, and she completely ghosted me, and I never found out why. And then I got this query in front of another agent who, asked for the manuscript, never responded at all. And then in 2012, my, at the time girlfriend got pregnant, and, I'd been just thinking about proposing anyway. So got married, had a baby, but I decided like, I don't know what life is going to look like when I'm married and I have a kid. So in addition to all that craziness, let me start a publishing company and let me get my book out there. Also, I just got that sense from that experience that, that what gets out there and what gets through the publishing machine, it isn't necessarily about quality. I mean, quality plays a role to some extent, but it's also who you know. It's also, I talked about the gears meshing for a movie, and like that still has to happen for a book to some extent. You still have to have time and money and people coming together, maybe on a smaller scale. But I just had that sense that I wasn't the only person who was in that boat. And, this is the kind of, condensed version that I end up saying a lot, but, I put Tortoise Books, I'd always had that, I'd always loved the tortoise and the hare story. I put up the website, established that as my brand, and started taking queries through the website. And the first one I read was Giano Cromley's book, The Last Good Halloween, and he had an agent, but they were butting heads about how to edit the book, and they weren't going anywhere, and they decided to part ways. And then the second author I published, Darren Doyle, he had the big deal. Like he had a book out on St. Martin's, and for whatever reason, it just hadn't sold well enough, or they hadn't marketed him right, and he wasn't getting traction on the subsequent projects. So that sense that I got very early on was that was that a lot of gears have to mesh for something to come together, and it doesn't always happen smoothly, and when it doesn't happen, it's not necessarily because of lack of quality. One of the other things I heard at that screenwriting pitch fest, this guy said, the only reason people get fired in this town, in Hollywood, he said, is because people say yes to things they should have said no to. Because obviously, anybody could pass on like Harry Potter, and say like, oh, wizards and trains, like, what is that? It's easy to miss the things they should have said yes to. But if you say yes to something that you should have said no to, a company ends up spending a lot of money on it and a lot of time, and if that doesn't go well, then you do that a few times as an editor or an agent, you're nobody's going to want to work with you anymore. So, I had that sense that the publishing industry was the same way, and that people just become kind of risk averse over time, and that's another reason why good stuff doesn't get out there, is because people become risk averse. People say no as a precautionary measure, and great stuff doesn't get out there.
And so what does Tortoise offer that's different? I mean, do you sometimes accept manuscripts that you know won't sell? I mean, what is it that Tortoise Books offers that the legacy publishing model doesn't?
I like to think that any book that we pick up could have a robust future, and that I like to think that any book that we pick up is a diamond in the rough that the right publisher maybe would succeed with if they were just paying attention to, and that we will succeed because we're paying attention. I have to admit, I get risk averse too. Like, I don't really publish poetry because, poetry is a big crapshoot. We do publish some books that are shorter than the traditional novel. Like, we've got one in the pipeline that's like 17,000 words. Another one I think we're going to try to sign on that's like similarly length. The publishing industry is geared towards books of a certain length, in part because they have to be wide enough that when you put them on the shelf, you can see the title of the book. When you put them spine out, you want to be able to see the title. Otherwise, nobody's going to take it out and look at it. And I do think the internet allows you to have a little bit more freedom from those physical constraints, but the legacy of those constraints is still there. But we do, we do try to take chances while still picking up stuff that we think has a chance.
I guess the biggest challenge, right, is how do you sell a book? It seems to me like that is the most difficult part of, like, there's so many books getting published.
Oh yeah.
How does the word spread on a particular book? I mean, speak a little bit about that. Like, for example, thought questions that come to me that you might be able to riff on. Like, can you tell if a book that you're going to publish is going to be a decent seller? Can you tell if it's going to be a long seller? Do you sometimes think that you might hire a publicist one day? I mean, what are the challenges of getting the word out about a particular book? I mean, I'm sure you mentioned to me one time that you see all these books as kind of babies. So you obviously have a great love for all these books. But how can you send them out into the world so that they get eyes on them? or people are talking about them? I would think that would be one of the biggest challenges as an independent publisher.
Oh yeah, that's the eternal question. And I always think that everything we launch, I mean, put it this way, I'm not going to pick something up unless I can talk enthusiastically about it for a long time, for months and years to come. And, I would love to be at that point where I'm like so trusted that if I'm putting something out, somebody will pick it up just because it's the Tortoise book,
Is that the goal?
Yeah, to some extent, that's the goal. Just to just be a trusted brand that's putting out great stuff. But I don't know what's gonna have legs and what's not. It's this book here, also here, it's a memoir by this granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, and the writing was exquisite. I wasn't sure it was going to sell as well as it did. I picked it up because I loved the writing, but it's, and she did hire a publicist, and the publicist definitely helped and definitely got some good stuff. But it was definitely, for whatever reason, the book just has legs too. Like it's, I think there's, everybody tries to quantify quality and say like, oh, it has this many 5-star reviews or this many people are talking about it or whatever. But there's an excitement, I think, when somebody's talking about something they're really passionate about that you can't really quantify. And I think the excitement of somebody talking about a book like this is what ultimately sells the book. And you can definitely try to increase your batting average by getting, trying to get media attention, trying to get it in front of the trades. The standard thing we try to do with books is get them in front of trade publications, 6 months before launch. Get blurb.
When you say trade publications, what do you mean?
The trade publications are Booklist and Library Journal are the library trades, which librarians read to determine what to stock. And Kirkus and Publishers Weekly are the bookstore trade magazines, which booksellers read to determine what to stock. And there's a couple other indie type trades, like Shelf Awareness, that try to do what the traditional trades do, but focus on indie stuff. But, getting books in front of those, so hoping somebody's going to talk about it excitedly. Before that, even getting it in front of blurbists so that people will, write a blurb that gets people interested. And then, getting in front of the trades, hoping that you get a trade journal to take a look at it. And they're like inundated with books, so there's really like no guarantees there. And then getting whatever like media publicity you can get, whether it's, a newspaper or a journal or, nowadays a podcast or a influencer or whatever. And the tricky thing is there's no, I talk about books as my kids, but like, I always say this, like, I'm the dad and the author is the mom. Like when my wife had our daughter, I was like, all right, let's go to sleep, and my wife was like, she was like wired, and she was like, she kept like waking up to make sure our daughter was, okay and still breathing and all that stuff, and I mean, I realized like very dramatically that first night that like, my wife gave birth to this person, had her inside her for months, and so she's gonna care more than I can. Like it's just impossible for me to care as much as she can. And similarly, the author that slaves away over something for months or years, they gave birth to that book, and they're going to care about it more than anybody else possibly can. I can care more than everybody else about the author, but nobody's going to care more than the author. But as the publisher, then I feel like it's my role to dress the baby for success, basically. Give it as many clothes as I can give it so that it can survive out in the world. So,
for example, how much does, from your perspective, are more Tortoise books sold through Amazon, through bookstores, through tables at book fairs, through the author's own efforts in presentations? I mean, when you look at the stats, how do most books get sold? How do most Tortoise books get sold?
It really depends on the book. I think there's almost always a core of like 100 or so books that you're going to sell to friends and family. And then getting outside of that core and getting it, selling it to strangers is really the tough thing. And definitely Amazon, you sell a lot. Like everybody badmouths Amazon, but it is a great way to level the playing field. And we built our business early on Amazon. We were on Amazon's KDP platform exclusively for the first little while. But now we've got a distributor, and they can focus on different channels. They can get it in front of people at Barnes & Noble. They can get it in front of people in regular indie bookstores, which we could do to ourselves before. But the hard thing with getting stuff in bookstores before you have a distributor is you're usually getting it on consignment, and then you have to just call and check in to see if they've sold any. And it becomes a very laborious, very laborious work. And then sometimes, a store will sell some, and then you won't be able to collect the, you invoice them, and you won't be able to collect it necessarily.
I mean, I guess, I know you, in 2020, you became part of the Publishers Group West, which is part of the Ingram Content Group, which is the distributor you're talking about. I mean, how well are they doing? I mean, are they getting your book into bookstores? Are you satisfied with how they're doing?
Yeah, they've been a great partner. It's been a big learning experience having a distributor, because I think the thing you realize after doing it yourself for a while is if you're the only one selling your books, you're going to burn out. You're going to wear yourself out. There's only so many book fairs and events you can do. There's only so many bookstores you can call and visit.
Sure.
You just can't, you're never going to get rich that way. I mean, you're probably not going to get rich the other way either, but at least having a distributor allows you to focus on, the editorial side of things a little bit more. They've been great for some of our books. They've definitely, like Darren Doyle's book, The Beast in Aisle 34 is our top seller. It's around 4,500 copies now, and somehow it's on Barnes & Noble's radar. And we sell a certain number of copies through Barnes & Noble, and it's one of our authors, Joe Peterson. He works at University of Chicago Press, and so he has a lot of visibility in the BookScan and stuff. And he says, things sold 15 copies last week, and it's been out for 3 or 4 years now. The tricky thing with the distributor has just been, okay, now I don't have to sell to every bookstore in Chicago, but I do have to sell to our reps, and I do have to get them excited about a book. And
I see.
Yeah, and so I have to get the metadata for the book right early on. I have to get, jacket copy that's good for them. I have to get covers that, that work and that they can sell. Sometimes I have a cover idea and they shoot it down, and sometimes that's for the best. But it's definitely, you realize it's a collaborative experience. You're not, just this. As Americans, I think we fetishize the notion of the rugged individualist, and I think part of growing up is realizing that that's bullshit, and that,
sure.
You realize, even as an author, alone, even if you somehow get stuff written and bound or whatever all on your own, you're still dependent on readers. So you're still dependent on relationships and people in some way, shape, or form. And I think, with the distributor, it's that, you realize you're in a relationship. You can't just be like, oh, sell my book, sell my book, sell my book. You have to do the stuff that they want you to do to get your books more visible. You have to.
But do you see, for example, a payoff? Is Tortoise Books selling more thanks to, Ingram Content Group?
Oh, yeah.
Did you notice a growth in sales since that moment?
Yeah, there definitely is. It's just it's definitely concentrated in certain titles. It does feel like the rich get richer kind of thing. It's I think not every book is going to, they're not going to sell every book equally, I guess. I could put it that way, but it's,
sure.
But you've got to get them excited about stuff, and you've got to, give a narrow enough list, I think, that you can give them stuff to focus on. So.
Yeah. You mentioned how is Amazon advantageous and disadvantageous to independent press like Tortoise Books? You say you started with it.
Yeah.
But it is it does level the playing field. I guess people can browse. I mean, I browse on Amazon. I'll even sometimes read the reviews on Amazon before I buy it through a particular publishing house. It seems as though it does give you a chance against the big five, no?
So the ways that's advantageous, first off, when you're on the KDP platform, which is their direct publishing platform, it's a technical marvel. You upload the book, it's a very clean website. Your book's up for sale very soon, and you get paid like clockwork, basically. Like everybody loves indie bookstores and everybody hates Amazon, but I never had to ask Amazon for money that they owed me. And I had to ask a lot of indie bookstores for money that they owed me,
Yeah.
and and partially that's just the nature of the business. It's a tough small business to be in. But, as a publisher, it is nice to have a platform where you're getting paid.
Sure.
The way that's disadvantageous is it's just so easy to get lost in the shuffle. And then once you are on the distributor, Amazon, leverages their size to get, harsh terms with the distributor. Like the distributor gets a smaller cut of Amazon sales than it does of any other pipeline, just because Amazon can kind of beat them up about terms and say like, hey, we're not going to give you 55%, we're going to give you, 52% or whatever. So Amazon is tough in that regards. And Amazon also has a lot of, like, there's a lot of window dressing you can put up on the pages. Like, there's something called A+ content for Amazon. And like, that's one of the things the distributor recommends. Like, hey, if you want this book to sell, you might want to give us some extra content to upload to the page. And it's like, well, that's an extra thing I have to do that I don't have to do anywhere else. But you do kind of realize
what is A+ content? What are they asking for?
So like when you go to a page, sometimes you'll see little like graphics with a blurb, rather than just having the blurbs all listed out in text, they'll have like a color image that's there, and so that's stuff that we have to choose, like, hey, do we believe in this book enough that we're gonna go through a little extra effort of putting together this A+ content, and you realize, I say this a lot, but you realize online a lot of times you're trying to jiggle the algorithm. You're trying to get something, some kind of movement in a way that will get the algorithms to start showing it to other people, basically. And it's not always clear how to do that. There are some really great discount book tools too, and that's another way that Amazon's good. And frankly, a lot of the other online retailers too, like you can do something like BookBub, that'll do a discount and get it out to thousands and thousands of book buyers who might want to take a chance on that because it's 99 cents. Because the ebook's 99 cents or whatever for that day. So,
but you lose money. I mean, you're earning less money by selling through those discount offers, correct?
It depends on the one. Actually, BookBub is usually good enough for sales that we make up what we paid for it, and if it succeeds really well, the book will start having legs. It'll start selling on its own a little bit more. Our top seller, we did a BookBub for it. Meiselman, which I think is number 2 or number 3, we did a BookBub for that at one point. It's definitely, that's one of the few promotional tools that I feel like you break even or make money on, which is,
okay.
Yeah. So, and one good thing the distributor is doing too nowadays, they recently enlisted us in a backlist marketing program where they basically do their own targeted advertising that they pay for, and then they only take a cut of like increased sales. So, and I know they're doing work because I've seen the additional sales, and also because like I go to the Amazon product pages now, and there's like a tortoise specific, A+ content block on there that I didn't make. But I was like, oh, that must be from the backlist marketing people, So yeah,
I know there was a kind of snafu when you first hooked up with Ingram, and I guess it had to do with print runs. And I guess my question is, could you maybe explain that a little bit, and then talk about how print runs now work when you publish? Are print runs still important, or is it more like, for example, when I order a box of books, I don't think they're sitting in a warehouse. I think they're printed in the moment. It's kind of a print on demand. Is print on demand, does it make your job as a publisher easier and more doable?
Yeah. So, and that's one of the interesting things was that when I got started with Tortoise, one of the things I realized was that print on demand, the quality was much greater than it had been in the past. And it also allowed you to not be gambling necessarily as much on every book, because they would print them as people bought them. So the problem when we started with Ingram, PGW is still very much built around the print run model, where like you meet with the pre-sales people and the sales reps, and they estimate like what your print run is going to be like for a book, and their pricing, like even though they were printing the books using print on demand technology, they had pricing that kind of incentivized you to order like a full run of like 500 or 700 books or whatever. So, they would do print estimates and say like, oh, you're going to sell 700 books. I'm like, okay, like let me print 700 copies, and then we were printing those on credit with them on the assumption of future sales. And then, sometimes it would sell 700 copies and then sometimes it wouldn't. And so then when you're in that situation, all the money you make on the one that did sell 700 copies is going to pay the printing bill for the one that didn't sell 700 copies. And for our part, I didn't take enough time to understand our financial statements too, and understand the things that we were getting charged for, which were things we agreed to get charged for. So part of the problem with a big part of the problem with them early on was just me not understanding our financials and not taking the time to itemize everything every month. But another part of it was them incentivizing the larger print runs, which they have changed now. So like now, they're incentivizing the POD stuff. There isn't this big price break at like 500. It's like a nice, fairly inexpensive, but and the unit cost isn't a lot much more than it would have been for those big runs. Like they've, it's maybe like 3% more, but it's, everybody in the industry gets obsessed about unit cost per book, and that is a big flaw. Like my friend Joe Peterson, who's published 2 books with us and has a third coming out with us in next May. He says, he works for University of Chicago Press, and they've moved a lot of titles to print on demand because he says, everybody obsesses about unit cost, but it's really, are you going to take like a $5,000 gamble on this book? And it's very easy to get that wrong when you're taking a $5,000 gamble on every book, versus.
When you say unit cost, you mean the cost of each book published?
Yeah.
Is that what
so
you mean?
if you what is it? If you do, trying to math here, my brain isn't braining, but
let's say, for example, what does a book usually cost? So if you're doing 5,
yeah. So a book a lot of times is between $3 and $6 per unit. So if you do 1,000 copies of a book, that's $3,000. Say it's $3 a book.
Right.
If you and then say you're doing it POD, and it might be $3.50 per book, printing them one-off individually. It makes a little more sense to do the one-off individually, even though it's like 50 cents more per book. Because again, you don't know how many you're going to sell. So, as much as you try to guess right, like you're going to guess wrong sooner or later.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned bestsellers. What have been your top 3 or top 5 bestsellers so far, Tortoise Books?
So The Beast in Aisle 34, actually, I'll grab a copy of that. Yeah, so this has been our top seller. It's a book about a werewolf who works at a Lowe's. 4,500 copies. I did a cover that we ended up pretty happy with. It's a good cover
Yes,
that
it's
gets
great.
people. Thank you. But more importantly, I mean, the writing is like instantly engaging. Like sometimes you read a manuscript and it takes you a little while to figure out how you feel on this, but like this one, like the first half page, I was like, I'm going to be publishing this book, aren't I?
Wow.
It's just one of those instantly arresting books. Let me get Meiselman here is up there too. It's
Another great cover.
Thank you. Yeah. Just a comic novel about a librarian who's surrounded by all these strong women in his life and doesn't really know how to deal with it. And just a really just fantastic, fun read. I'm trying to
Yeah,
think.
no, I've
Yeah.
read that book. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. The last quarter of that book is just a tour de force. It all comes
Oh,
together really, really
Yeah.
well at the end. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Brooks' book has done pretty well. Hannah Sward's book is doing really well lately.
So, but
Strip,
when you say these, whose book has done really well? Who?
Hannah Sward's book, Strip.
Ah, sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean she, it's I think it's a great enough book that people are going to talk about it without you doing any advertising. But she does do her own. She's got a Substack that I think is pretty widely read, and she somehow seems to have nailed that sweet spot of like having an online presence that isn't obtrusive and isn't saying like, hey, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, but an online presence that's engaging and makes you want to hear more from that person. Like, did you ever watch the show The Critic?
No.
Oh. So The Critic was a really funny cartoon where John Lovitz voiced the title character, and there's this scene where there's a William Shatner robot, and in this episode of The Critic, like Shatner had just written a autobiography or whatever, and like the Shatner robot just says like, read my book, read my book.
Yeah.
Read my book.
There's a lot of that.
And like so many people, their online presence is
it's terrible.
Basically like the
It's
Shatner
terrible.
robot, Yeah. And that's so
I don't know why. Oh, it's so off-putting. I don't understand. No, also the book Strip, she's an attractive woman who is talking about her life as a prostitute. That's just going to get people interested. I mean, and she's a good writer too. I mean,
but it's so much more than that too. Like it really is.
No, of course it is.
Yeah.
Of course it is. But I mean, of course it is. But in other words, it's an idea that makes sense that book is successful.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, yeah. I mean, how much does just the question I've had, like when you were reading Darren Doyle's book and you knew a half page in that you were going to pick it up, or I've heard you talk on the podcast about reading Delirium Vitae by David LeBrun.
Yeah.
And you were in the doctor's office with your wife and you were just immediately transported into David's world. It's a wonderful book too, David LeBrun's book. I mean, how long does it take you normally to, yes, there it is. How long does it take you normally to know that this is a book that at least deserves your serious consideration and that you're going to read it through to the end?
I always say, like, if I'm not actively looking forward to it by the third time I pick it up, then it's probably time to put it down for good.
Good.
The best ones I do really know in the first page or two. John Verro's book. I think you had talked to John Verro before, before he came to me. That was another one. Yeah, the first page, I was like, there was just something about that first page that was just instantly engrossing, enticing, just kind of drew you in and made you want to know more. But yeah, like sometimes,
the John Burrow book.
Yeah.
The John Burrow book. I just want to give the title. It's another great cover. Do you have it there to show people? Because it's another great cover.
Yeah. Play rewind. Yeah. I have just about all the books just because I'm in my Tortoise HQ here. So.
Ha. Yeah. I mean, is the submissions process something that's overwhelming? I mean, I know that you had the submissions, has it changed? I mean, as Tortoise Books has remained successful, and it's 12 years is a long time for an independent press. I mean, how do you deal with submissions now so that you're not overwhelmed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So early on, I just had an open form on the website, and I was like, I'm just going to stay open all the time for submissions. And I think that was, in retrospect, that was hubris on my part, because in the beginning, it was just a very slow trickle of submissions. And then it got to the point where I was getting more submissions in a week than I could publish in a year. And there could have been great books in there that I just never had the chance to really, I mean, and I say, like, I knew from the first page on some of these books that I was going to publish them, but you also have to be not frantically reading them. You also have to be in a headspace where you're receptive to good stuff. And I think if you get too many submissions, you're not going to be in that headspace. Like I liken it to that I Love Lucy episode where the chocolates are coming down the conveyor belt, and they're trying to wrap the chocolates, and there's too many, and they start eating the chocolates, and they just get overwhelmed by the conveyor belt of chocolate. And I used to not bring up that analogy because I didn't want to sound like self-pitying, but I realized, like, no, like, I'm stuffing my face with free chocolate. So, like, the submission process is a lot of free chocolate. But how do you manage it in a way that you still enjoy eating chocolate,
No, I think it's a great metaphor. And I also love the metaphor about the father and the mother, about how it's really the mother that has to take care of the book, that's worried about its every breath, you know? So I think I love the metaphor. I heard that on another podcast you gave. So, well, how do you do it? How do you make sure that nothing slips through the cracks?
Well, so what I did, I realized I could turn the submissions into a product on the web page. I realized I could have a limited inventory of submissions, basically. And then when I put the submissions up, because like the Tortoise website, like, it runs on Squarespace, and every product you put up, you pick whether it's like unlimited inventory or whether you set a number. So I was like, okay, like I could do the submissions as a free product and just set the inventory to like 10 or 20 or whatever. And then once those 10 or 20 submissions are done, then I'm done reading submissions. And it's funny because the first time I did that, I put the form like way down at the bottom of the product page, and I hadn't even advertised it at all. And I think within 24 hours of putting the free submission form up, I got a submission email, product sale email from this guy, Joe Worthen. And he was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad, like, he was paying attention to our site like that much that he noticed like that there was something new and there was a way to submit. And in his book, I got to plug that one real quick, All Trap No Bait. such a fantastic book. This is our most recent book that came out, and the funny thing I've noticed, like, about getting blurbs is, most times, like, you send the book to the blurbist, and the blurbist provides a blurb, and then you thank the blurbist. And, like, this book, like, the blurbists have been thanking us. Like, it's, like, that good that they're like, oh my God, like, thank you for letting me get a chance to read this early. Like, this is really something, But, that came as part of doing that free submissions process. And, because I waited to open that up until I had whittled down my pile a bit. And then the other thing I've started doing recently is a paid submissions process where, I call it the luxury submission and critique process. So you pay $300. You get a guaranteed Zoom call and feedback in 4 weeks. So, like, if you have this manuscript and you don't know whether it's good or bad or almost good or in the middle or whatever, you can get the direct feedback. Because the other thing is, like, it's really hard to get any, like, again, to this day, that book Resistance, I have no idea why that woman ghosted me. I have no idea if she decided to pick up that other book or if she had issues about this other thing. And I think a lot of authors really just want to know, like, hey, am I hitting the mark? Am I not hitting the mark? As authors, we're at a disadvantage compared to musicians. Because if you're in a band, or comedians, for instance, if you're in a band or if you're a comedian, like, you can go live in front of an audience, and if you suck, you're going to find out, like, pretty soon.
Sure.
It's like, oh, wow,
Yes.
like, everybody's leaving the room. Like, people are throwing vegetables at me. Like, what's going on, But you're an author, you're slaving away at the keyboard, and then you're querying into the void, and you're never getting that feedback to say, like, oh, like, yeah, you really suck, or, oh, like, this is really great, or, but it's not quite what we're looking for, or whatever, and of course I never tell people, like, oh, you really suck, but, I try to be a little bit more respectful than that. But the luxury submission process is a chance for people to get the actual face-to-face feedback and close that loop and say, like, hey, like, this is what works for me, this is what doesn't. And by the way, I'm not like, and to some extent people can get that in an MFA, but they're paying a lot more money for it.
Sure.
And I think teachers in the MFA have a bias towards, keeping their students, frankly, and keeping the thing going, whereas, with me, it's like, okay, like, you're paying me for my time and my judgment. Here's my time and my judgment. And, but then the good thing is, if I like it and I pick it up, I'll refund the money, because I would rather have the long-term success, and it's actually been a very clarifying process for me. Both David's book and John's book came in through the paid process, and it's like, okay, like, do I like this book? And how about, do I like it enough to give back $300 that's already in my bank account? And that's definitely, like, gives you some clarification. But I've definitely, come by some great titles that way. So.
How much does it, for example, how much does it cost to produce a book? And I want you to answer this question, including the labor that you put in. Like, for example, I know you, for example, do the covers. I know there's time that's spent editing. Now, if you're doing this, for example, to prepare a book for publication, to pay for an editor is quite expensive.
Yeah.
To make a cover is quite expensive. I mean, you're designing the book too, and so on and so forth. I think a lot of authors complain because they feel as though, you know, all that work should be done for free by the editor. But you put in a tremendous amount of work to produce a book. Like, what do you think is the cost in I mean, all the hours you put in uploading the metadata to Amazon, all this sort of stuff, reading the book? What do you say it costs? And give yourself a decent hourly wage.
I probably should. I probably should get more clarity about that. You know, I'm in a money recovery program, and they talk about getting clarity. I probably should get more clarity about what my labor costs actually are. I will say with Hannah's book, I used to sign contracts after I'd done the editing. And then with Hannah's book, we got to the end, and then she kind of decided she wanted to shop it around a little bit more. And I was a little peeved. But she generously offered to pay me for my editing, and she paid me $1,000 for the editing work. And I left the door open with her by, you know, rather than being peeved, I was like, you know, I love this book. If it doesn't find a home, like, you know, the door's open, you know. And she did come back, and I paid her the $1,000 back because I wanted the long-term success of the book, and I wanted a relationship of goodwill. But yeah, like, I do put a clause in the contract now that if I edit the whole book and you somehow go back on the publishing decision, that, you know, that you have to pay me $500. But it is probably worth more than that.
It's worth a lot more than that. It's worth a lot more than that. Yeah, sure. I mean, I know from personal experience, it's worth a lot more than that.
Yeah.
What are your favorite aspects of editing and your least favorite?
Oh, I love editing. I mean, I just love just getting to really dive into something and help sharpen the artist's vision, and to just exactly nail down, like, what works for me and what doesn't work. And, you know, what I love about a book, and like, oh, this section of the book gave me pause. Oh, and here's why. Like, if I change this word to this, and if I change this word to that, like, maybe it'll work. And just the chance to tinker with something in a way that hopefully sharpens the artist's vision. And you know, it's a conversation. Like I was telling one of the authors, like, it is a conversation. Like, I'll propose stuff, and, you know, some authors go with all the suggestions. Some authors fight tooth and nail. You know, some authors, the book we put out is very similar to the manuscript they sent, and that's fine. You know, in some cases, some authors, like, I've had them redo an ending or whatever, you know. And I think I just love every book that I put out because it feels alive to me, and it feels like a world I want to spend time in, as much as I want to spend time in this world. So, you know, spending time in that world in the morning, you know, just getting a little vacation from my routine to go into this other world for a bit. I just love that. Yeah, and things I don't enjoy.
Least favorite, like,
just when people are when people are getting really nitpicky about stuff, or really, you know, because it's, you know, talking about the mother-father analogy, like, the mom cares a lot, but the mom also has less distance and less perspective, you know.
Sure.
So sometimes you're like, look, I'm trying to tell you for your own good that, if you tweak the sentence a little bit, it would be better. And sometimes people are really eager to fight you on that. And that can be frustrating. And I'm not always right. I'm not trying to say I'm always right. There have been times authors have fought me on stuff and I've realized, oh, they were right. I try to be open to that. I try to, recognize when I'm wrong, but some people it's just tougher, a tougher road than
Sure.
others.
No,
So,
I've had some experience dealing with writers, and it's difficult sometimes dealing with their egos
yeah,
because you do a lot of work on something, and your goal is really to make it better for them, so that everyone shines, so that the book
yeah,
shines, so that they shine. And often what you get in response are insults, or in my case, that's been the case, and that's not pleasant to deal with. But I mean, how often do you have to deal with that?
um, I don't feel like I've had insults. I I think just the back and forth where it's just like, no, I still want to do it this way. No, I still want to do it. I think that's just been the bigger thing to deal with. So,
I see. Yeah. Uh, how about your own writing? I mean, I've read from the Altered Space series. I've
yeah.
read two of them. I think I've read Public Loneliness and I've read Zero Phase. Those are
Oh,
two,
cool.
right? I really
Yeah,
loved Public Loneliness
yeah,
because, it's about Yuri Gagarin and his flight into space. And um, you're a very good writer in general, but also on a line by line basis. You're a very clean writer. Um,
yeah,
and I wonder how, for example, you balance so much. You've got a full-time job,
yeah,
you've got Tortoise Books, you've got your own writing, and you've got
yeah,
a wife and two kids.
yeah.
How do you do that?
Um, my writing probably has suffered a little bit in the last few years, but I've also put out a lot of the things I really want to put out. So I'm not. I do always try to work on something of mine first thing Monday morning. So like I always take Sunday off, and then first thing Monday morning, I'll crack open whatever manuscript of mine has, and I'll work on that first for a little bit. It's I use this analogy a lot, but when you're on the plane and you're looking at the safety cards on the plane, and they say like, put your mask on first before you help out somebody else. You know,
Ah,
um, like that always sounded selfish to me, but it really is. It really is a useful bit of advice, because if you're not breathing, you can't help anybody else. You know.
I mean, that was my question. Do you think being a writer makes you a better editor? Do you think it's
Oh yeah,
possible to be a good
unquestionably.
editor
Yeah,
if you're not a serious writer?
yeah. No, it definitely does. I think it really, it helps me enjoy the process, and it also makes me alive to the moments where an author writes something where I'm like, wow, I wish I had written that. Wow, like that's a great way of putting that. I'm really happy I came across this. So I think, like as a writer, the feeling of just coming up with something that's simple and economical and clean, or
Yeah.
the feeling of coming up with something that's a little jumbled and then cleaning it up and figuring out a way to make it more pithy. And so I think that helps you recognize like clean, smooth writing somewhere else. Like you recognize like, oh, this is jumbled, but I see what's good about it. Or, oh wow, this is already really clean, and I only need to format it or put a comma here or there or whatever. So I think trying to put my writing first a little bit, with the caveat that like right now I'm writing a a memoir that's a little bit painful to work on. So I don't necessarily want to be working on it that much. So I don't, I mean, I do need to like just knock it out at some point. Putting that first, and then the days when I'm editing, like putting the editing first, ahead of the, I do some financial stuff right when I wake up. Like I'll, like if I've had sales, like I transfer taxes to my business savings account and stuff like that. Just to, because you realize, like, because we went through with the distributor, we did get to a point where we were in pretty heavy debt. We got to a point where we were like $26,000 in debt, and you realize like solvency isn't art, but it's like the frame around the art. It's like the pedestal that the statue sits on. Like if the finances are not right, like you can't really appreciate the art. Like, and I saw when I was in debt that I wasn't enjoying the editing as much, because I was like, oh my gosh, I did all this work and I have less money. Like, like this is awful. Like, what's the matter with this?
Where were your reading tastes formed, or how? I mean, what are I guess, I heard in an interview you talked about a Michael Mann movie, I think it was Insider, where you talked about, there's a line in that movie where the Al Pacino character, or whoever Al Pacino's playing, he says, I'm interested in everything, because it's about journalism. You use this
everything
to talk about your... how that sort of inspired you to go to journalism school, because you went to journalism school at Columbia.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, does that quality also help you as an editor? That you're interested in everything?
Oh, totally. So early on, I was very much a accumulator of facts, I say, as a reader. Like as a kid, I just wanted to read, my cousin Beth would tell you every time I went to a family gathering, she had this set of like Charlie Brown encyclopedias, and I would go up and lay down in the hallway and just read these Charlie Brown encyclopedias and just accumulate all these facts. And I always wanted to know how things worked. And I remember reading about like nuclear reactors and nuclear bombs and lasers, and just trying to see how stuff worked as a kid. And then fiction, I hate to say it, but my fiction reading initially started in earnest. Well, there was, I did do like the library book club competition things in like third and fourth grade. So I was reading a lot of fiction then, but like the first big like adult books I was reading were like Tom Clancy, like techno thrillers, The Hunt for Red October I read in sixth grade, I think, in the summer before sixth grade. And it was a lot of work at that age, but I was also like, I just loved the fact that you could tell this really big story with ideas and, just scenes that you filmed in your head. I thought that was really cool. And I do think there was a certain amount of comfort food quality to it in retrospect, in that, like I was a Irish Catholic American kid, and, here's this Irish Catholic guy with, American good guys, and, it's Jack Ryan saves the submarine, and then, Jack Ryan saves the country, and, Jack Ryan saves the world, and all this stuff. And, there's a big comfort food quality to that, like if you're reading something because you want to feel good about yourself, you're going to look for stuff where the characters resemble you. like it or not, that's kind of a very common trait. And then somewhere in there, I started reading this guy Ralph Peters, who was he was a Fox News contributor for a long time, but he did fortunately quit over the network sucking up to Trump and Trump sucking up to Russia. But he had books where the Russians won sometimes, or the Americans went through this big defeat or whatever, and they were more interesting books. They weren't necessarily feel-good books, but they were books that really made you think about. It wasn't just like one triumph after another kind of thing, and then somewhere around there, I fell into Hemingway, and I did. I talk about the Caine Mutiny a lot. I read the Caine Mutiny senior year of high school, ironically because I loved Tom Clancy so much that I saw this list of his favorite books, and that was on there. And the Caine Mutiny is just an exquisite book. I think the Caine Mutiny and Slaughterhouse-Five are like the two great American novels of World War II, basically. But it's one of these books that, like, it just puts you there. And when you're reading it, you just don't want to be doing anything else. You get a little annoyed at your body for needing to go to the bathroom and needing to eat food, because, like, man, I just want to be in this world for a little bit. Like, come on, So I think that's how my reading really developed, was noticing those books that put me in those worlds, and gradually noticing when those worlds felt authentic. Because when I read Ralph Peters and read Hemingway, I started to realize that Tom Clancy didn't feel authentic. When I read Herman Wouk, I started to realize that maybe Hemingway didn't feel as authentic. So
So is it authenticity that you're looking for? When you, for example, when you're reading submissions, is that what you're after? Like authentic, true voice that sort of magically transports you to a particular author's world?
Yeah, either authenticity or a convincing facsimile. Like there's that old joke about Hollywood that the key to success in Hollywood is sincerity. Once you can fake that, you've got it made.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if it's authenticity or the feeling of authenticity, but just when I'm absolutely convinced that this isn't words at a page, but this is a world I can live in,
Yeah. How do you think in the future, looking in the future, how do you think artificial intelligence will affect your job? And do you use it at all?
So I'm not as worried about it as most authors are, because, like, for instance, I don't think you could have fed my first 4 space books into an AI and gotten the 5th one, Like, sure, I don't think, and I don't think, unless you have a human who's willing to trudge through all the slop, if AI did put out the complete works of Shakespeare, or the 21st century equivalent, like, would anyone know it? Would anyone be able to trudge through all that slop and find it? I think the answer is no. So I
mean sort of like on as far as like copy editing. I mean, I don't think that AI will ever be able to produce sort of like creative work. But do you think AI is something that can make your job easier? Like, are there a lot of tedious tasks that you think will...
I wouldn't mind it for layout stuff, honestly. Like I
Right.
wouldn't mind it for layout stuff. And I did the one time I've used AI so far, I fed a couple AI prompts a week ago for a book cover. I have this image in my head and I kind of fed it into the AI prompt just to see what it would be like. And it's one of those things that didn't exactly scratch the itch, but it did make me think about, like, okay, that's not quite right. Well, why is it not quite right? Like,
Sure. No. Yeah.
you know, where does it need to be? So, I mean, I think it can be a useful tool. Like, is it this next wave that's going to remake civilization? Like, no, like it
Yeah.
just
I
feels
don't.
like
Yeah.
all hype, but
I think it can work as a good assistant. I mean, like for
yeah.
example, are you the only? Is Tortoise Books at all committee run? How much do you hire out, and how much do you have a kind of committee of readers that you bounce ideas off of?
I have readers and editors that come in here and there. I mean, you worked with Lauren on My Half Orange. I've got to reach out to her and see how she's doing. She was working with one of our authors on an anthology, but I never heard back from them that it was done. I don't know. It's one of those things. Like I'm busy enough that if people are here, great, and if they're not, it's kind of, I don't know. Like I had somebody reach out to me about an internship several months back. I gave her one of our books that was particularly a challenge to edit, where I felt like I had missed some stuff. I had her do a read through. She caught some stuff in that. I gave her a few manuscripts to read, and I've got to ping her and see if she's read them. So sometimes I'll have people do the reading and editing, but it's I can't even pay myself a full-time salary on this, so it's not like I can expect to keep anybody else decisively engaged. So
I mean, how about like, I know, is Chicago a literary city? I mean, Tortoise
yeah.
Books is set in Chicago, and how much is Tortoise Books a part of that literary scene? And you think that'll grow in the future?
I think we're a big part of it. I think, there's it's a very collaborative literary scene here. We have these lit salons where a lot of authors get together and chat at a bar every month or so. And, you rub shoulders with people like, Rebecca Mackay, who is a Pulitzer finalist. People like that who had some success, and it's a very collaborative feel to it. Like from the people I know who have been in New York, they feel like it's more cutthroat, judgmental, competitive, and it doesn't feel like that here. It feels like a really happy scene. Like in that, when I hear people talk about like the Seattle scene in the early 90s or whatever, like I like to think it's that kind of thing now, where people collaborate, people work together, people root for each other's success, and read each other's work,
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of that here.
Do you have certain independent publishers that you talk to, that you sort of talk shop with? And are there any independent publishers that you seek to emulate?
Yeah. Doug Seibold from Agate Publishing, he's been kind of my publishing guru. He lives in Evanston and he does Agate full time, so he's kind of my role model in that respect. And he actually helped us get our deal with PGW. because they're distributed by them. So he's one. He had some really notable successes as a publisher. He discovered Jessamine Ward, some other people like that. He had some good stuff early on. 713
Is that
books.
your goal? Yeah, of course. 713 books. Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to
know about
Leland a
them.
lot when he was getting started. Yeah, he's definitely been a friend and ally. Yeah.
Is that something that you foresee, like in an ideal world, would you work full time on Tortoise Books? And
Oh
do
yeah.
you see that as foreseeable? I mean, can you see that in the foreseeable future?
I mean, we'd have to sell a lot more books, or do a lot more critiques, I guess. It definitely seems like a stretch now, but from what I've seen, I do feel like a lotto player or something. Like, all I need is the one big hit. Yeah, it's
You really haven't had that. You really haven't had that breakout book yet, right? I mean,
yeah,
Darren Durrell's book is 40.
not to the point where I could think about alternate career options, but I do have to say, like, the stability of the full-time job is nice.
What do you do?
I legal financial systems, so I work for a law firm. This time and costs go into a financial system, and then bills come out.
Okay.
And
I was just
we have
curious.
to
Yeah.
keep that all going. So yeah.
But so, for example, I guess that's how do you foresee Tortoise Books expanding, or is it more slow and steady? Just keep doing what you're doing, 7 books a year, between 7 and 9 books a year, and
Yeah.
just looking for quality. I mean, is that your goal? Is to just continue doing what you're doing?
That's my goal now. Yeah, like I last year we had a big project at work, and I deliberately dialed the output down a little bit because I was worried about being too busy. And then this year I dialed it up, and I realized, like, wait, no, I wasn't doing myself any favors, because I was scrambling to do some of this stuff. And so like 7 a year feels like the right amount in terms of giving the right amount of attention to each book, getting all the, because you have this cycle with the distributor, like right now we're finalizing our metadata for the spring 26 titles. We've got to get the covers finalized, by mid-September maybe, and get ready to present those. And if I have too many titles, then I can't get everything done to the standard I want. So
What's an aspect of publishing that you think people aren't talking enough about? I mean, what is it like when you hear people bitch and moan about it, when you hear people complain that this particular group isn't represented or that particular group isn't represented? I mean, what do you think as an insider people should be talking about and people should be concerned about?
I think people should be concerned about the fact that even big publishing houses are expecting authors to do some of their own publicity. It's, some Tortoise authors I know have gotten on, gotten onto the big publishing list or whatever, and I'm happy for them. And some of them do seem to get a decent amount of publicity help from their company, but some other authors I know that have had big books out, like, they're still doing a lot of their own publicity, or hiring their own publicist out of their money or whatever. And I think that's really awful and unfortunate, but it's kind of the nature of the the game. And when authors hire a publicist, I can't pretend I'm not grateful for the help, 'cause
Sure.
it is, again, it's like, the mom is gonna be the one that cares the most sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I asked this question before. Do you think that a publicist will ever be something that Tortoise Books hires? I mean, I know they're expensive. I read somewhere
Yeah.
there's like $15,000 a year or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to have the money and the resources for a full-time publicist, but I would probably hire an accountant first. When I talked to Doug at
Really?
Agate,
Hmm.
when I talked to Doug at Agate, he said, the first outside person I hired was an accountant because, that's a lot of work and I don't like doing the bean counting. And I do love the clarity of it, but, it is a lot of, the core work. Ideally, I think there would be, the publishing function, the accounting function, and the publicity function. And I would be able to spend all my time on the publishing and have other people do the publicist and the accounting stuff. But, we're not there yet. So,
Yeah, maybe that's something. Maybe AI is something that might help you one day with the accounting. It's possible.
maybe,
Who knows?
maybe.
Because that's I would think drudgery. But anyway, I'm not a math guy, although I studied it in college. I don't know why. It was, was misguided, misled.
Yeah.
Well, Jerry, I appreciate you taking the time.
All right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we've been speaking for about an hour and 30 minutes. I planned on just going question by question, but I just abandoned myself to the organic mode and just, riffed on things you said. Is there any question that you hoped I might ask that I didn't?
I can't think of anything. Is there any question you hoped to ask that you didn't get a chance to ask?
Well, no. I mean, I think I asked everything. No. I mean, I'll probably look at my notes later and say, "Darn, why didn't I ask that particular thing?" I guess on a personal level, maybe I know you are. I mean, I grew up in a house. I'm also Irish Catholic. My father was 30-year member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think I was raised in the philosophy of the 12 steps more than I was in the theology of Catholicism. I know that's something that you're a recovering alcoholic. You live by your sobriety in the day at a time. I mean, I guess I'm curious on a personal level how much Alcoholics Anonymous helps you with your publishing project.
Well, if I talk about it, it's not anonymous.
That's true.
I
We
would
can
say
cut this
just,
out if you'd like.
I guess what we could say, we could say spiritual principles and having a good relationship with God. You realize that you want to treat people the way that you want to be treated. And if you don't do that, your relationships suffer and you can't look people in the eyes anymore. And that's not a good place to be. So, yeah, we could say
Yeah,
that.
I guess I would say that in my life, the idea of living for the moment or living day by day, which is a kind of struggle for me, generally speaking, but to have had that drummed into me, not to sort of anticipate too much or not to live day by day, a day at a time, it has been tremendously helpful to me in any grand project I've had. And I just thought that a day at a time fit
Oh, that
with
definitely does
slow
help.
and
Yeah.
steady.